Hey y'all, welcome to this week's show. Today we're going to talk about, one of the most ubiquitous of flowers. It's actually a shrub. Gosh, if you've ever grown roses, you know what a pain they can be. Oh my word. I remember, well, let me tell you, first of all, they have really great medicinal value. So we're going to get into that, but there is a major caveat, and it's that the wild roses or less hybridized, I guess, roses are the ones that are going to be more medicinal. Tea roses are really good, but wild roses will always be the best. There are several varieties that are medicinal, though, and I mean, probably, well, we'll get into that in a minute, but I mean, my least, I'm going to say I have my two least enjoyable horticultural enterprises or botanical enterprises have been growing roses and hoeing nutgrass out of peanut fields. One I did when I was a child. I grew up on a peanut farm. We grew peanuts, we grew tobacco, we grew cotton, we grew corn. Pretty much everything else took care of itself, but those peanuts had to be, my word, they were high maintenance. And of course, now everything's done by machine, and for the most part, I mean, it was when I was a kid. We're talking 40 years ago, basically, when my grandfather was really growing peanuts a lot, 40 to 35 years ago. And most things were done by large farm equipment. And, it wasn't that big a deal. But we also had our own patch for the family. And you're sitting there on like 100 acres. Had like 10 acres really for the family gardens, and let me think, 38 acres, I think, total. That included the horse pastures, cow pasture, the pig pen, chickens, the orchards, and the gardens. And just very small area. I mean, certainly no more than 5 acres provided enough vegetable food for the entire family. And then some. I mean, we had blueberry bushes, we had apple trees, pear trees, peach trees, grapevines. But yeah, I mean, row after row of tomatoes, cucumbers, squash. Wow, I mean, corn, certainly a whole, patch of corn that would move around from year to year. Okra, oh man, that was good okra too. It was old heirloom okra. All kinds of squashes, summer squashes, and pumpkins and watermelons. Oh, lots of watermelons. All just fantastic. And that really did not take up a lot of space. It's amazing how much food you can grow on a small piece of land, really, especially if you have manure from animals. I mean, that's, always going to be the case. But there would also be, a good acre or two or 5 probably of peanuts, really for the family. And the same would be true of potatoes. I mean, anything was going to be a staple crop. And oddly enough, beans certainly. Oh gosh, yeah, beans and peas, tons of them. I mean, we grew. There was not a single day until my grandmother had a heart attack, probably her second heart attack, at about the age of 82, when she did not have a pot each for field peas and butter beans on the stove. So, I mean, that was the staple. There was always going to be cornbread or corn, you know, biscuits in the morning, but cornbread or corn to go with the afternoon, evening meals. There was going to be field peas and butter beans, and then whatever was in season. There'd be some meat, there'd be some fish, there'd be fresh, you know, sliced raw tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers. I mean, we were half French. That's, you know, crudité or salad or however you want to look at it was always on the table. There was never a time when we did not have some form of salad on the table, even if it was just potato salad. And man, she made a good potato salad. But peppers, grew a lot of peppers, various varieties, some hot, some sweet. That's kind of rare at that time in eastern North Carolina. And this was down in Bladen County. And but you know, one side of my family being essentially Creole, we always had peppers and celery, you know, and garlic and onions and, you know, a lot of things that maybe a lot of the other local folks didn't cook with. But yeah, field peas, butter beans, corn, potatoes. I'm thinking those were the main staple crops. Of course, collard greens, turnips and mustard, cabbage. Didn't grow a lot of lettuce. No, it was more your cold crops. Never grew broccoli or cauliflower or anything like that. That was something you got at the store every now and then. But yeah, those staples were definitely field peas, butter beans, corn, potatoes, onions, and then the greens. Yeah, collard greens, mustard greens, turnip greens, and man, it was good eating. It was good eating. Anyway, we did grow a lot of peanuts, and like I was saying, if you're not Southern, you may not understand how that's a staple. But see, in the South, we don't just eat peanuts roasted or fried, which, man, if you've never had peanuts straight from the field, first of all, let me get to that in a second, but straight from the field, and then shelled and fried fresh, you have never had cocktail peanuts. That mean, fry them, you just put them, you take the raw peanut, and most people have never had a raw peanut, but you take that raw peanut, and it's got to be at the right humidity level. If it's too fresh out of the shell, it will take too long to fry, and it gets kind of mushy. If it's too dry, it'll fry too quickly. You're better off doing dry than really moist peanuts, so because you can just kind of flash fry them, they'll probably be okay. But you just put them in, they fry, they kind of blister up. You put salt on them, and I mean, it's like the best thing ever. I mean, literally, the only thing that's actually better than that is straight out of the field, just raw. You pull them up out of the ground. Peanuts are a leguminous plant, and the peanuts grow under the ground. You pull the whole plant up, and it's just covered. The roots are just covered in dozens of peanuts, big, nice shelled peanuts, in the shell. Pull them off, open them up, and eat them raw. Oh my gosh, that is truly. I mean, that if you've never tasted a raw peanut, you can't imagine how good it is. It's got this grassy flavor. It's somewhat sweet. It's just amazing, honestly. But the other way we cook them in the South is boiled peanuts. You take those, what they call green peanuts. Now, those are not. They're not actually green. They're raw peanuts. That means raw as in green, or green as in raw, I guess I should say. Straight as fresh from the field as you can get them. The fresher, the better. But if they've been sitting around a few weeks, it won't hurt. And you boil them in water with salt. And boiled peanuts, I mean, that was just the ubiquitous staple when I was a kid. I mean, there was always going to be some boiled peanuts either on the stove or in the refrigerator. There'd probably be some liver pudding. There's pork liver mixed with various spices. Absolutely delicious, by the way. Some pickled eggs, pickled pig's feet. and some leftover cornbread. I mean, that was like when you went in the house and there was nothing else. There was always that, and oh yeah. But where I was going with that is peanuts seem to have a Velcro-like attraction or magnetic type attraction for nutgrass. These grasses that grow in there, and they're weedy and they'll choke out the peanuts. And you have to get out there literally like almost every day, at least 3, 4 days a week, with a hoe in the hot sun, because this is the middle of summer. You harvest your peanuts basically August, September, So you're out there in the intense heat, acres away from the house where there's some cold water or something, with a garden hoe. And you have to go out there and hoe up the nutgrass. And it is you fight with it. That nutgrass fights back. Your hoe gets tangled. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible. Now, there's one thing I have experienced in my life that was worse than hoeing nutgrass out of peanuts. And that would be raising, growing, whatever you want to say, hybrid roses in Athens, Georgia. Oh, my word. So, went down to Athens, around 2000, yeah, it was right around the year 2000. Went down there, and my mom had bought a place down there, and I thought, and it was like a guest house, an apartment, and I thought, hey, I'll go to school, and this will be great. And, it was great, and she said, you don't have to pay rent, and I said, well, I'm going to do some work around here one way or another. I'll take care of the gardens. Little did I know that the lady who had the house before her, it was a really nice house, a nice piece of property, beautiful gardens. I mean, it was a full-time job to be a gardener at that house, actually. I mean, the lady who had lived there before had to pay someone to do it, so it was a good trade-off. She was a rose grower, competition rose grower. There were, I think, 37 varieties of roses on that property. Each one, except for the tea roses that grew up by the fence, were hybrids, and they needed constant care, constant pruning, constant fungicides, especially in the humid heat of Georgia, constant insecticides, constant fertilizer, constant managing the watering. It was awful. Honestly, I almost began to hate roses. And then, years later, back in the mountains of North Carolina, and I'm out walking my dog, and this scent, I'm just walking along, and this smell, like, that is the most wonderful smell. And it triggered in that's the smell of roses. Those hybrid roses had no scent? There were maybe 5 out of the 30-some varieties that had a little bit of a rose smell. They were beautiful flowers. They did not have a beautiful scent. They did not have rose hips, which are edible and very good for you. And really, they could not be used for medicinal purposes because, one, they were very weak in their medicinal properties because they had been hybridized that way. But 2, because all that fertilization and chemicals and watering, they just didn't have the value. The tea roses up by the fence did, but I wasn't really thinking about that at the time. I did eat the rose hips off those. They did have nice rose hips. They're small, not the biggest, but they were nice. But when I got back up the mountains and discovered the wild rose, often called dog rose, I think it's Rosa canis or something. We'll get to that when I actually start looking at my notes. Oh, my word. The smell, they're small flowers. They were white where I live. Apparently they can come in, various shades of pink and different things. But they were white, and you could smell them like a mile away. And that's when I really fell in love with roses. After vowing and declaring I would never have anything to do with roses again, I really fell in love with those roses. And they're wonderful. The best smelling flower there is, bar none. I mean, it's the rose. It's got to be. Yeah, and it is Rosa canina, or dog rose. That's the one that has the most documented use in herbal medicine. But actually, all wild roses are interchangeable. And in North Carolina, we have the Rosa Carolina. That's a native wild rose. We also have the swamp rose and the climbing rose. Those are all native to my area. The rest are naturalized, including actually dog rose. Dog rose is not native, but it's gotten out. Our natives are the Carolina rose and the swamp rose and the climbing rose. But the dog rose has gotten out, and it's crossed with just about all the wild. But those crosses are really nice. They include the Cherokee rose, sweet briar rose, damask rose. Really. If you don't live in too cultivated an area, if people aren't cutting everything down and spraying it with Roundup, if you follow your nose, you're probably going to find some wild roses. And of course, the rose family is much bigger than the rose itself. I mean, apples are in the rose family, believe it or not. Blackberries are in the rose family. Cinquefoil. There's so many. I mean, the rose family is actually quite large, and to some extent they can be used interchangeably. They all have an astringency. They all have some vitamin C. But today we're going to talk about the rose proper, okay? And Dioscorides, going back to ancient Greece, said that roses are cool and astringent, and dried roses are more astringent. The juice must be pressed out of them while they are still young, though, first cutting off the white under the petal. He called it the nail, I don't know. And then it was pounded, and it always has to be in the shade. You can't have them in full sun. That'll really destroy the antioxidants, essentially, and a lot of the qualities. Roses, like an apple, being in the same family. When you cut an apple, it turns brown. Roses oxidize very easily, so you got to act quickly. But dried roses, according to Dioscorides, boiled in wine and strained, are good for headaches, as well as the eyes, ears, gums, the perineum and intestines, rectum and vulva, applied with a feather or washed with the liquid. That sounds a little ticklish. I think I would apply with a cloth, especially several of those areas. I don't think applying with a feather would be the best idea. But anyway, he said the same, but without straining, so essentially used as a poultice. We're good for bruises and inflammations, especially the area below the ribs, the abdomen, essentially. Good for the stomach, for erysipelas, which is a streptococcal skin infection. Roses dried and pounded into small pieces and sprinkled on the thighs. And he doesn't say why. That's odd. Okay, we're not going to worry about that. Anyway, soothing and astringent, takes care of inflammation. It's pretty good. Okay, so moving on, he says the rose hips. That's basically the berry of the rose. Remember, this is a fruit-bearing plant. Taken in a drink, stop loose intestines. He means basically diarrhea and blood spitting. He talks about even back in ancient Greece, they made pomanders, which were aromatic fruits, basically, that would make clothes smell good and keep bugs out, or you could even wear them around your neck, and they did that a lot back then. They didn't have deodorant, they didn't bathe a lot, so they wore things around their neck. Normally, when we think of a pomander, we think of like an orange or another piece of citrus studded with cloves. And it smells fantastic, and they dry out, and they can be used, in clothing and all that. But you can also make a pomander of rose. He says take 40 teaspoons full of fresh roses, which are beginning to fade, before they have absorbed any moisture. Combine with 10 teaspoonfuls of Indian nard and 6 teaspoonsful of myrrh. Now that's going to be darn expensive, okay? Nard, even in 3,000 years ago when this was written, was one of the most expensive substances on the face of the earth. It is a resin as well as myrrh. You're probably going to be better off with your orange and cloves. Um, Certainly going to be cheaper. It's going to work just as well. But he combined these with iris and different things, and said I guess this is a small pomander, probably about the size of a, I don't know, quarter. He said that it was worn around women's necks to dull the unsavory smell of sweat. And there you have it. People have been vain for as long as people have been on Earth. Maybe even before that. I have no idea. I mean, vanity is a symptom of pride, and pride is the first sin, as they say. Well, by about 1100 AD, St. Hildegard von Bingen said that roses were cooling, and they are. Roses actually, rose infusion, rose oil, or rose infused water, or the essential oil of rose, all have a cooling effect actually on the body. But she liked to place rose petals on the eyes. She says it draws out the humor, basically mucus from the eyes, and makes them clear. And actually, the astringency of roses will actually improve eyesight, but it's kind of tightening up the tissue. But it can also help with cataracts. The roses and violet petals have both been used traditionally to prevent or help reduce cataracts. Obviously I can't make a medical recommendation to do so, but that is a traditional use. I'll just put it that way. The antioxidants, the anti-inflammatory properties, the astringency, and also the slight acidity seems to help. She said that one with small ulcers on his body should place rose petals over them. This pulls the mucus from them. One who is inclined to wrath or anger should take rose and a bit less sage and pulverize them. When the wrath is rising in him, he should put this powder in his nostrils. The sage lessens the wrath, and the rose makes him happy. I have never tried that. St. Hildegard had insights I don't have. She learned her herbal medicine from angels and the voice of the living light, as she said. I'm not particularly prone to wrath, but I can lose my temper every now and then. And I'd have to have some close at hand. It's not like I could think, well, tomorrow I'm going to get angry and I need to sniff some of this up my nose. If you ever get a chance to try it, just let me know how it works. She said the place where a person is troubled by cramp or paralysis should be rubbed with rose, and he would be better. And rose is very good topically for cramps and stiffness. You can include in liniments and balms. It has a lot of really interesting uses, actually. She said it was good to add to all medications, and she says if a little rose is added, they are so much the better because of the good virtue of the rose. Gerard, we're back to 1500s England. He wrote a lot about roses. Roses, the English were fanatical about roses, so there's no doubt about it. And I mean, he's an English herbalist from the Elizabethan era, and so he wrote a lot about roses, including poetry and quotes from Greek authors, and wow. His gardening advice, he was the Queen's gardener, after all, and Shakespeare's neighbor. But to medicinal uses, he says the distilled water of roses is good for the strengthening of the heart and the refreshing of spirits, and is likewise for all things that require gentle cooling. It's interesting that, we're looking at like 3 different regions of the world now, and each one has said cooling. I mean, they do have a cooling property. He said the same being put into junketing dishes. Junket is sort of like a pudding, I guess, if you want to think of it that way. Cakes and sauces and many other pleasant things gives a fine and delectable taste. That is something we don't do a lot in America, and I really should, before I move forward, point out. In Europe especially, roses have traditionally been used in cooking. They're actually quite tasty. I mean, yeah, you do have that aromatic nature of the rose. The flavor of the rose is slightly sour, slightly sweet, floral. That's the petals. Of course, rose hips are sour, sweet and sour. You can make wonderful jams and jellies with them. You got to strain the seeds out though. Those seeds can actually be used as itching powder. You don't want to eat them. Um, Gosh, so many dishes. You can make a compote of rose hips and serve it with a fatty meat, just like you would cranberry sauce. Really quite good, actually. And I mean, rose hip jam on a piece of buttered bread. Fantastic. Really, rose water, just rose infused water, used to be placed at everyone's on the table beside everyone's plate, so they could dip their fingers in the rose water and be used to clean and to make things smell better. It also stimulates appetite to an extent. I have the recipe somewhere. Gosh, there's an old Spanish recipe for quail or pigeon. I think it was pigeon in the original, cooked in a rose petal sauce. I know it's in one of my books, probably the Omnivore's Guide. If it's in my notes here, I will try to mention it. Oh my word, it's like a once in a lifetime dish. I mean, it's something. It was mentioned. I first heard about it in the book or the novel. May have been the movie actually. Like Water for Chocolate. I saw Like Water for Chocolate when I was in my teens. It blew me away. It made an extreme impact on me. Um, it's a beautiful movie. It's even a better novel. It's just like, if you're a foodie, that you need that movie. Like Water for Chocolate. You need that movie. Man, I don't even care if you're not a foodie. I mean, a lot of women like it because it had the romantic elements, but it is intense. It is disturbing. It is sad. It is incredibly moving. But the way the main character in the movie, she essentially expresses herself through food. Okay, um, the people who eat her food experience the emotions that she had while making it. Maybe that's the better way to put it. And I know it sounds stupid. I mean I'm just hillbilly talking about something like that. Um, it is a beautiful film. It is a moving film. It is a powerful film, and the novel is even more so. And I think that is where I got the not maybe not the recipe, but the idea to look for the recipe. And then I found it in old cookbooks, and it does seem to trace to Spain, probably during the time of the Moorish occupation, when Spain was under the rule of Islam. They, of course, would not eat pork, but everyone kept doves or pigeons. Maybe quail too, but I think the original was with pigeon or dove. And so on the roof of every house, there would be a dovecote, and people kept pigeons for food. Still very popular in North Africa, excuse me, Middle East. And so I'm thinking that's when the Spanish developed this dish. It is so good. It is, I'm just telling you. I mean, you've got, I can't even describe it. If I don't have the recipe in my notes for today, do look in my cookbooks. I'm sure it's there. I mean, wow. It is just like, I mean, we look at pigeons as like, I don't even know, flying rats. I think people call them that. No, they're actually really good food. I mean, as long as they've been eaten clean, pigeon is far superior to chicken, or it's as good as duck, maybe even a little better. Quail is a little more mild. Um, Quail is just like, I don't even know, but about the most mild meat there is, and you combine it with this, like, floral notes and the acidity of a little vinegar and the spices, the pepper. Man, I mean, it's just like knockout, really. Anyway, where was I? So the Gerard said it mitigateth the pain of the eyes. So he also used it for eye inflammation. Bringeth sleep, and also fresh roses themselves provoke through their sweet and pleasant smell. Oh, he was saying the smell of rose made him sleepy. I've never experienced that. The juice of roses, especially the damask rose, doth move the stool and make the belly soluble. Interesting. So astringent, but also a bit laxative. Interesting. The infusion of the same and the syrup made thereof, I give some Latin names for it. Syrup of rose is apparently what it was called in England, is solutive, which must be made of the infusion of again, it could be laxative. Okay. It is profitable to make the belly loose and soluble. Boy, well, of course he's English. The English have always been obsessed with their laxatives. Good for the excrements that stick in the bowels, and also good for the veins. Phlegmatic means decongestive. The syrup doth moisten and cool, and therefore allayeth the extremity of heat and hot burning fevers. Yeah, it has some febrifuge properties. He says good for it mitigateth the inflammation of the entrails and quencheth the thirst. It is scarce good for weak and moist stomach, for it leaveth more slack and weak. So he didn't think it was good for digestion, but good for just about everything else, I guess. Boy, he goes on about different kinds of roses. He spent a good 10, 20 pages on roses. So if you want to, as Gerard, interesting. Anyway, you look at it. Culpeper said that the red rose was more binding than other species, more astringent. See if he said anything different. Cooling, good for inflammation of the eyes again. The white rose, particularly good for inflamed eyes. So I think we'll just skip ahead to Miss Grieve. And she goes on at great length. The English love their roses. I mean, they really do. She talks about the history of the rose, how it was first cultivated in Persia, that's Iran, how it moved across the globe. Pliny quotes Pliny the Elder in ancient Greece and Horace, and wow. Try to get head here to medicinal uses, because she gives it a good 20 pages too, just in history and lore and poems and my word. Yeah, I'm still trying. Oh, Bulgaria, at this point, apparently in the 1930s, was making the finest rose distilled essence in the world. Cyprus was making a rose oil, and wow. Talks about the difference in roses in Germany, Algiers, and Morocco, India. All right, finally, medicinal actions and uses. The petals of the dark red rose, known as, we don't need to know that, Rose gallica, are employed medicinally for the preparation of infusion and confection. So they made a candy out of it. It was being grown in Oxfordshire and Devonshire at the time. British Pharmacopoeia directs that red rose petals, again, they're talking about where it's being grown. Let me see if I can actually get to what it's used for. Wow. Astringent and tonic. It was official medicine in England at the time, in syrups and rose water and distilled and etc. This is actually a bit overwhelming. She said the old herb was considered the red rose to be more binding and astringent. She quotes an old herbal from like 1400. Wild rose, the dog rose, she mentions, the flower of early summer. Yes, quite good. Wow, word, did she go on about roses? I'm going to try to skip ahead to something more modern. Let's at least get up to the United States, because she must have gone on 30 pages about roses. That's incredible. Okay, no, we'll stop here with the Irish herbal. You know, John Kehoe's always very succinct, to put it bluntly. He said of white rose, it has a binding and cooling nature. It is good against inflammation of the eyes, swellings of the breast, and burning fevers. Water may be distilled from them, which is very good for eye troubles. All eye troubles, he said. Take 1 handful of white roses, some vervain, celandine, rue, fennel, eyebright, and daisy, and house leek, which is basically aloe, and boil them in 2 quarts of water until 1 quart remain, and add a noggin of virgin honey. I think a noggin's about a cup, if I remember correctly, of pure honey. Boil it again. Clear off the scum from the surface and use that, bottle it and use it for all eye problems, whether webs or film. That's a pretty complex formula. Interesting. Of the damask rose, he says the flowers aid in digestion, purge bilious substances, open obstructions of the liver, and are good against jaundice. And the red rose, he said the flowers stop diarrhea, menstrual and other flows of the blood, strengthen the stomach, prevent vomiting, and tickling coughs, and are useful in consumption. Even, I guess we'll take the dried roses, steep them in hot vinegar, and put them on the head for pains, headaches, and inflammation. Yeah. And he says a conserve of it is beneficial for consumptive fevers. That's essentially a jelly. Father Nate, also very flowery in his description of roses, but he says, talks about how widely they were grown in the gardens in Germany in the late 1800s, but he said it was very good for anyone in the family suffering from gravel or stone in the kidney or bladder. It would ease the pain and purify the affected parts. He said, I know of a very old gentleman who in former years has suffered much from gravel and stone, and often did not know what to do or where to seek for help. This tea of roses was recommended to him, and he got so accustomed to it and fond of it that for the years past, the usual cup is never allowed to fail a night before going to bed. He likes it better than the glass of the best wine. And he says, these are my spirituous liquors. This is the oil which keeps the almost stopping machine of my old body working from day to day. Interesting. Brother Aloysius said the greatest power lies in the pips or seeds of the rose hips. The fruits are most highly recommended for kidney complaints, gravel, and stones, especially in elderly people. And let's see, Polish tradition, Sophie Hodorek-Snab, says the fresh leaves crushed into a pulp in a mortar mixed with sugar is an excellent remedy for consumptive lungs, especially if taken with a tea made from barley water. The juice extracted from the flower petals, boiled in wine and soaked in a rag, cools burning eyes. She quotes an old Polish herbalist who said, who suggested using rose hips for bloody coughs, bloody emenses, and diarrhea. They were also used to halt excessive menstrual bleeding. Very important. All the rose family of herbs are astringent. They can help stop diarrhea and excessive internal bleeding, especially menstrual. Always have at least one around. I have I don't even know, a dozen varieties of the rose family growing in my yard, just like out the door. There's wild geranium. There's, all kinds of stuff. So, gosh, there's blackberries, and there's just tons of rose family members, all of which have those astringent properties, and they're essential to have around, really. Now, finally getting to America, King's Dispensatory of 1898 lists rose canina, that's the dog rose. Pharmaceutical uses. Conserve made by beating the pulp with sugar is called conserve of dog rose. Or conserve of hips, and is tenacious, retaining its softness for a long time, even under exposure to the air. It is a useful material for forming pill masses, as it contains less tannic acid and may be used as a substitute for the conserves of red rose. Okay. When you go through several varieties of roses, how to make rose oil, how to make rose water, um, chemical compositions. Red roses, they say, are tonic and mildly astringent. They've been used in passive hemorrhages and excessive mucus discharges. They've also been found beneficial in bowel complaints and are more commonly used in ophthalmic, that's eye diseases, as a poultice. Or the pith of sassafras, an infusion of roses in acute ophthalmia. I wonder what the sassafras had to do with that. I'll have to look into that. I'll have a whole nother show on sassafras. I've actually done several. I always find new uses for sassafras, or old uses that people forgot about when the government told them not to use it anymore, because for no apparent reason. Yeah, very interesting. But okay, modern use, plants for future, lists several. Dog rose, petals, hips, and galls are astringent, carminative, diuretic, laxative, ophthalmic, good for the eyes. We'll go with that. Good for eye inflammation. And tonic. The hips are taken internally in treatment of colds, influenzas, minor infections, diseases, scurvy, diarrhea, and gastritis. A syrup made from the hips is used as a pleasant flavoring in medicines and is added to cough mixtures. A distilled water made from the plant is slightly astringent and used as a lotion for delicate skins. The seeds have been used as a vermifuge. Yes, they will actually expel worms, but they will make you itch at the same time. Probably not your best option. You don't want your butt itching while you're getting rid of your worms. Okay. The fruit of many members of this genus is a very rich source of vitamins and minerals, A, C, E, flavonoids, etc. And it's been studied for reducing incidence of cancer and as a means of halting or reversing the growth of cancer. Rose hips are really amazing. They also list the Carolina rose. It says the fruit skins have been eaten in the treatment of stomach complaints. The fruit of many members of this family is a rich source of vitamins and minerals, etc. It is also a fairly good source of essential fatty acids, which is unusual for fruit. That is true. The rose hips of some roses do have a fat content. They were essential for survival in early America. It said being investigated as a food that is capable of reducing the incidence of cancer and also as a means of halting or reversing the growth of cancer. So, y'all, I'm going to wrap it up there. Next week we'll get in, and I did not find the recipe. I'm sorry. It is in one of my books at least. Maybe I can find it and in a future show give you that recipe for quail or pigeon with a rose petal sauce. It is so good. It's just like mind-blowing. The wine and the roses, everything comes together. It's mind-blowing. The spices, the dried fruit. I mean, they're very, I found various recipes that all date very far back, and some have more of a Middle Eastern kind of Muslim influence. Some are very more Spanish. Some much more French in their approach. Gosh, they're all good. Really. You're probably going to want to start keeping pigeons or doves or whatever you want to call them. Basically, two members of the same family, or quail, and really get into cooking them because whoa. But anyway, next week we'll get into another member of the rose family, which is rubus, blackberry and raspberry, and I'm going to try to find that recipe for you. I know I've got probably 30 different variations on it, so I'll try to come up with some basic rules of thumb. It may not be the next show, but sometime in the future. Anyway, y'all, have a good week. Get ready for fall. It is almost upon us, and I will talk to you next time.
The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.